Okay, well, I will begin with Counselor Tiffany Koyama Lane. Counselor Counselor Koyama Lane, also known as Teacher Tiffany, is an award-winning educator with 16 years of experience teaching in public schools. A proud leader in her union, she has spent years fighting for vibrant, safe classrooms for Portland students and better conditions for Portland school educators and staff. As a fourth generation Japanese American Yonsei, Counselor Koyama Lane stands on the shoulders of generations of people working for change. She lives in Southeast Portland with her husband and two kids, young kids. As Yansei, a fourth generation Japanese American, anti racism is one of Counselor Koyama Lane's core values. In the summer of 2020, she supported local children who started the Kid Centered March for Black Lives, a youth led series of marches and events that took place through the summer of 2021. In all, the marches brought in dozens of Black speakers, performers, and vendors, and activated thousands of Portland people across Portland. She is a founder and administrator of Raising Anti-Racist Kids PDX community group, which shares resources for parents and kids around anti-racism and equity. Now you can give the applause. Okay, next we have Samir Kanal, Counselor Samir Kanal. Samir was born in Overlook neighborhood in North Portland. He is from a union family and a small business family, a family that lived in Portland area for 50 years. Both his parents are immigrants from India and are now retired. His father is a PSU alum who worked as an economist and a small business owner. His mother worked for over 30 years for the state of Oregon's refugee resettlement program and was a member of SEIU. Whoop, whoop. He has one sister who is in her final years as a medical resident. After working for Governor Inslee in Washington, advising the Gates Foundation on how to better connect with the United Nations system, and another stint in retail, the start of COVID pushed Samir to reevaluate what he wanted to do and where. He moved home to Portland and found a job at the city of Portland as a project manager for the Police Accountability Commission. Samir's public service also includes activities outside of his day job. He is co-founder of the Northwest Association of Global Affairs, which provides extracurricular programs focused on international relations for college students. He is a member of the City Parks Board. He is also a former member of the DEI Committee for Dodgeball Seattle and a current board member for Dodgeball PDX. He is also a supporter slash member of the NAACP, Democratic Socialists of America, Portland, Coalition of Communities of Color, India Cultural Association of Portland, and several other community groups. Um, well, I'm really excited about this panel discussion. I'm gonna try to scoot back so we can include the room. And so I really had a lot of talking points prepared about like 1913, the charter, 7 attempts at reforming the government, but you've already heard all that. So I really just want to go to December 19th of last year and really reflect on the moment that these city councilors were sworn in under the new form of government. And I would encourage people to go back and watch that video and hear the rendition of Nina Simone's Feeling Good by LaRonda Steele, and it really solidified the moment and all the years of hard work, everything that the city's staff, everyone involved, really that moment culminated in these folks being sworn in. So throughout that election cycle, you also tackled a lot of issues and heard from a lot of constituencies around climate, environmental justice, music venues, police accountability, renters issues, walkability, housing, labor, economics, transportation. So there is really a lot that is reflected in the results of the city council race and the councilors that we have. So let's just start with your committee assignments and your priorities for those committees.
Yeah. Hello. All right. I am on 2 committees because I've been voted by my colleagues to be the council vice president. And so I do some extra duties assigned with that. Thank you. And so I chair the governance committee, which I'm really excited about because I see that as a chance to help make sure that this new form of government that so many voters are excited about and it's giving hope to so many people right now in these times, that to make sure that it's running smoothly. So we're working on making our very first almost like rules handbooks and talking about specifics where other jurisdictions they've had decades or a very long time and they have it in there. This is how the seating chart goes, or this is how who decides what is on what committee. We're having these conversations and we're talking about that. And having been a teacher for the past 16 years, it also is something that I talked about on the doors, like why I was excited to be hopefully be part of this brand new form of government in the inception of it, to really be able to help shape a collaborative way of rulemaking and coming to agreements. And it's definitely not perfect, but we're figuring it out and we're trying to get there. So that's governance. And then I also sit on transportation and infrastructure. So there are 5 policy related committees, and then there is finance and governance. And I really was excited to be on transportation and infrastructure because something that I care about a lot of issues. Almost all the issues show up have shown up in my 3rd grade classroom. But one that really feels personal and just kind of hits me in the gut is traffic violence and just the number of lives that have been lost in my neighborhood. For those of you that aren't from Portland or might not know, there was a youth librarian not too long ago that was hit just sitting at the bus stop, just waiting to go home, and was hit by a reckless driver and was killed. And like really around my home, there are a lot of stories like that. So I am working with community groups and also trying to bridge that gap between community groups and advocates, and also our Bureau of Transportation, to really be having conversations about taking this seriously and how can we be putting it at the center. And so that's a goal that I am bringing, and I know it's a big one and it's a long one, but just continuing to raise up voices, and I think it's something that appeals to a lot of folks.
Yeah, I am on 3 committees. So I'm on the Labor and Workforce Development Committee, ensuring that we're supporting folks who might have some of the same experiences that I did, where I grew up in Portland in the metro area, and I left because I couldn't find a job that was going to pay enough to pay the rent. And I was gone for over 14 years, trying to come back all the time. And what ended up happening for me is I managed to get a job in Seattle, but could never get a job down here. And so ensuring that we're working on developing well-paying jobs in Portland is my primary priority for that committee. The second one is climate resilience and land use. And I think there's a nexus between those issues and kind of all the other committees. But one of the things for those who aren't from Portland, we have 90% of our liquid fuel storage for the whole state in a single area, which is in District 4. I am in District 2, but we're literally across the river from each other, and if something went wrong at that location, the critical energy infrastructure hub, it would affect a lot of my district as well, including the part of it that I live in. And so working on that is a core priority as well. I also have asthma, so I'm mindful of the impacts of where you live on your respiratory health is a pretty significant thing, and also how that's disproportionate between different parts of our population. And then I'm a co-chair of the Community and Public Safety Committee. And so there's 2 of us who co-chair it, and we work together to plan the agendas and kind of are charting out our work plan, but really taking a tour and figuring out how to get our public safety systems to work together, which is a core part of why we changed our form of government. And I think you all heard about that a little bit already, but trying to get people to take down the silos and also to take down the places where we duplicate efforts. As well as ensuring accountability for the population, for how we plan for things, and certainly for the first responders and what they do. And I think all of that is to build a more holistic, prevention-focused public safety system, because whatever your best response to a 911 call is in your mind, it's a lot better to just not have whatever the incident was that made you want to call 911 in the first place. And so I think it's also a lot cheaper. So that's kind of my prioritization there.
Thank you. So you briefly described the committees that you sit on, and it sounds like you hit the ground running. And so this next question is about the atmosphere, the environment that you're walking into, and how would you describe that in your own words?
So, I worked across the street at the Portland building, which is where most of our non-city council mayor staff work. And so in the sort of administrative bureaucracy. And it didn't feel like a far distance to cross that street, but it is actually a very different building with its own priorities and its own culture. And although the form of government changed, that doesn't guarantee anything. All that the change in our charter did was enable the forward progress. It doesn't guarantee it. And so you walk in knowing that there's work that we all have to do to ensure that more representative government, but also that there's a status quo, and even there's sort of an inertia there. And I have heard it described as sort of the ghosts of government for 150 years that did it a different way. And the most common refrain in that building is, well, we've always done it, and that sort of thing. Maybe not those exact words, but that is a part of the inertia. So at the same time, you have 14 elected officials, of which the overwhelming majority of them are new. And a lot of new energy, and we're bringing in the people that came with us and the people that got us here. And the people that we talked to along the way who had a very specific need that was going unanswered. And so those two things are often, we're visibly, publicly having those two things come together and trying to come up with an answer to those things. And I think that's the single biggest theme of what I've noticed since coming in.
Can I take a super informal poll and see how many folks are from outside of Portland, visiting outside of Portland? Awesome. Okay, and how many folks are here in Portland? Okay, cool. So let's see, the question is, what's it like? What's the vibe?
How would you describe
How would
the
you describe
environment that
it?
you're walking into?
I mean, that swearing in was amazing. I know my husband overheard a county commissioner who can sometimes be a little grumpy saying, "Oh my gosh, even I'm inspired and believe there can be change." And so I think starting off, we have had so much excitement and hope. I think I heard someone say, you might have said this, someone said I think everyone's kind of hitting a wall, and someone was like, yeah, that new city council smells kind of wearing off. I don't know if that was you or someone else, but I think we're kind of at the point where we're all feeling tired. We're in the middle of a really hard budget cycle, and even without having a budget shortfall, even without the federal government being what it is right now, this would already be disruptive and hard. I would say overall, while we can always find things that we need to change and work on and push, I think it's a great group. I still feel very hopeful. I think out of everyone that was elected, it might be maybe closest would be the mayor. I'm definitely the one walking in with the least familiarity with City Hall. We have gotten awesome people into office that have not been elected officials, and I think I'm the one that has had a little bit more culture shock, with just being oh, now people go, "Hello, Madam Vice President," very seriously, or even just the acronyms. We were recently talking about that. There's a lot of jargon, and that has been a steep learning curve for me. I said this when I was door knocking, and I still believe it, that I am bringing a lot of my tools and skills as a teacher, where, you have a group and you come together and you're like, this is the group, and who walked through the door deserves to be there, and we're kind of stuck with each other, so we're going to be figuring this out. And so I do feel like I bring that approach. I would say my colleagues are open to it and voted me as vice president. Sometimes I do feel some of them look at me we don't understand her. Is she really this genuine, or how is this real? I think, let's see. I think we've also had
It is real, so you know.
We've also we have these chances, like Councilor Kanal is saying, to decide if we're going to kind of reject old approaches or pivot. And because there are a lot of folks that have just been in local government or state government or just like kind of political insiders, it also just makes sense to me. It's developmentally appropriate that we're going to kind of lean to what you know. And so I do see it as part of my job to like come in with fresh eyes and be like, that's strange, that's weird. Okay, average constituent wouldn't know what you're talking about there. Because I also know the longer you're swimming in the water, like you won't be able to see it. So if I'm doing this 6 years from now, I won't be able to see some of those things. And I do think we just have much better representation for our city. It's really exciting. Like I was hoping I'd have like a couple people I was excited about on council, and we have, it depends who you ask, but like 6 to 8 people that are progressives, leftists, like 3 to 4 even on top of that are wild cards. So like we have a lot of possibility to make some big change.
Well, I think we should continue with the points that you're making around diversity, the makeup of the council. And so because of those who are now in the council chamber, what conversations or viewpoints feel possible now to express that didn't feel as possible before?
Yeah, a lot of them. And before I get into enumerating them, I just want to note that we do have both. I mean, you heard her yesterday, but Candace Avalos from the Charter Commission, and now is one of our colleagues, and also Julia Meyer, who is the project manager for that commission, who helped bring in thousands of people into this process of developing what the future was going to look like. And without that, you don't have any of what I'm about to say. And then for me personally, I'll also note, you all know Colin, I hope by now, but I've known Colin for like 15 years, maybe more actually. God, we're old. But trying to think about ranked choice and how to bring more people in to the electoral process to get the kinds of people into office that can ask these sorts of questions. So the question was, what are the sorts of things we can talk about? And I'll say on the policy side, we've had very established actors that have been able to lobby the city for a long time and able to get their opinions sort of accepted behind closed doors. So one, the very fact of having 12 instead of 5 councilors means that it's just harder to do anything behind closed doors, right? And we're also all inclined to want things to be transparent. And we're asking the question to get the answer on the record. And on the record doesn't just mean literally you could ask for it as a public record if you knew how to do that. It means put it in the council chamber so everybody can see it. I think questioning why we do land use decisions the way we do. There was a question over whether or not we had a land use permit for one of the things in the critical energy infrastructure hub that I brought up, the Zenith one, which came back to us from the state, got approved by the administrative side, and having the ability to question that. Why did that happen? What was your thought process? That's not something that has happened a ton before. A couple specific times it certainly has. And I guess maybe a lot of the things that I could mention are things that did happen, but not often. Like rarely, actually, in the old form of government, and now it's becoming more regular. The culture of City Hall. I mean, there is I imagine that everybody here is aware that of in your own cities and states how culture matters so much within, organizational culture matters so much within any sort of group dynamic. And I mean, if you're familiar with Tema Okun's work, right, white supremacy culture in the workplace is a thing. That's a thing that exists. You should definitely look it up if you're not familiar with her work. And so those are the sorts of things that we're able to talk about in a different way. And then certainly, police accountability. I'll definitely shout that out, which is something that Candace and I both worked on in different ways before we got in. There's not a lot of people around the country running on that in 2024. We were able to, right? And we were able to get in and now have the conversations, not from the perspective of responding solely to public pressure, but from the perspective of policy making as a normal thing to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because so many of us, one, who really centered the working class and talked about supporting families, talked about, making sure that historically marginalized groups were centered in the conversation. I feel like because so many of us, one, that's almost been like extra power and given like some credibility to us being able to bring that with us into our governing. And I feel a sense of, I've had groups say, oh, we've never felt like invited to speak before council in this way. Like we're used to like always like fighting our way in or like pushing our way to be at the table and give some public testimony. And now it seems like there has to be a little bit of adjustment to being like, oh no, you have counselors that are like asking your opinion. How do you want to help have a say in this? Do you want to help craft this? And that'll take a while, but I do feel like there's more ability and more of an energy of like, these doors are open to you. You all can like go walk through City Hall if you'd like. It's just a block away. And also as a teacher, I've been inviting children in and classes in and just wanting folks to know like, this is your space. Like we work for you. Like this is your City Hall. That's been something exciting.
So you both raised themes around transparency and depending on who you ask, there is an impression that there is a lot of backdoor deals being made. Big decisions were being made that felt rushed under the previous form of government, given that councilors or commissioners were in charge of the bureaus. And so can you think of an example? You've been governing since January 2nd, I believe. And is there an example that comes to mind that how transparency has played into the policy-making process? Or a decision that you've had to make in the first 4 months of being in office?
I'd say something that I see happening and we're working towards is trying to have more transparency around the budget and also show folks that we are listening to feedback, because I know there are a lot of constituents, community members that feel like, okay, if we come to this meeting or we write you a note, is that actually going to matter? And so for those of you that aren't totally familiar with our new form of government, in the old form of government, we had 4 commissioners and the mayor who all made up city council, and they were voted on citywide, and they actually like ran the bureaus. Like they were in charge of the water bureau and the fire department. And now we have have you guys talked about the different districts? And now we have, okay. Okay, so you already know about that. But so I have had joked like, oh, I would never have wanted to run for that form of government. Like I don't want to be in charge of the Parks Department. But we really get to focus on like our constituents and then also legislation. And so I think a big piece with the transparency is like pieces bringing in constituents, taking their feedback, showing them how it's actually incorporated. And that's something that I say to the mayor. Like, okay, you changed this in your budget that you're about to release because you heard this from listening sessions, like you should point that out. And so for me, just trying to show constituents like I am listening. So I'm doing a weekly newsletter, trying to put things online. I think a lot of us are doing that too, and truly am listening. So when I go to a school site and they're telling me about a problem, I'm actually trying to be transparent about how I'm sharing that and hopefully influencing things like the budget.
Yeah, the showing your work aspect is a huge part of it, and just because you also want to know as a person writing in that it mattered, and for someone to acknowledge it and say your name and say, hey, I read this, and every now and then for someone to say you changed my mind. You know, I had a couple of those in the last week where I was a little skeptical of a program, and then a bunch of people told me, hey, you should look into this program, and I did, and it's great. And that's part of it. The other thing is the thing I mentioned earlier about Zenith, that approval process. The fact there are things in land use that get done behind closed doors all the time, all across America, and this one also did, right? It was an administrative approval, but the fact that it was able to be questioned publicly, and there was actually like 3 different conversations in full council openly about it, brought a lot of transparency to what it is, what happened, why that might be great, why that might be bad, both from a process and from an outcomes perspective.
I mean, in short, we had 11, I think, out of the 12 counselors vote to look into and investigate a situation where a lot of constituents and environmental justice groups had felt like there were backroom deals being made about a fossil fuel company here in Portland. And so I mean, part of what I said on the dais, even though there were people from the city saying, well, that we were transparent or we tried, it's like, it doesn't matter. You have all your constituents, you've lost trust. So we have to rebuild that. You have to earn it back. And so I think that was an important vote. And I even saw some people responding to one of my posts saying like, wow, that actually is making me, because so many of the councilors were on board with looking into that, they thought maybe this new form of government is working. Maybe there's not just going to be like really set factions where people vote a certain way just based on their allegiances.
So we're talking about the policymaking process, and while the city elects a mayor citywide, the mayor does not have a formal role on council, and only votes in the case of a tiebreaker. How would you describe the role of the mayor versus the council when it comes to proposing and setting policy? And I think
We can talk about it together too. Yeah. I feel like we're kind of figuring it out. The mayor that we elected is really focused on the single issue of ending unsheltered homelessness. He seems to like really bring a genuine desire to bring council in. So as he's working on the budget right now, and then it'll become public, and then we'll be working on it with him. And he's setting up every other week sessions where he sits down with each councilors and he's listening to us. And so I think that he's trying to find ways where it's not even formal, that there is some back and forth. And I can speak from my personal experience, but he's someone that when I see him, like I'm questioning something, especially if it has to do with labor stuff, because he's new to that world, like I'll text him and he usually calls me right away. I still am not totally sure how it's going to work out with him. He does break the tie, but even with that, we've been talking about how we need to write either code or a resolution about specifically what happens. Like, is it we do go 6-6 and then he votes right away, or do we have a couple times to try it out? So these are the fun things we're figuring out.
Yeah, so I agree with all that. I'll also say, mayor is sort of the executive branch. They hire the city administrator, the chief of police, the city attorney, council confirms those, and then everybody else. We call what you would normally call a department a bureau in Portland. I don't know why. That's probably a question for the charter folks. But the bureau heads all report to the city administrator. And so we're not directly involved in hiring them, but certainly there's conversations, right? Especially if it's a high profile one or one that we have an interest in. So that's where the sort of gray areas come in, where the relationships are really important. The city attorneys work for both of us. So, we've asked the questions, I asked this question in public, like how do you decide when on a separation of powers issue? And especially when it's coming up in the middle of a meeting in public. And I'm paraphrasing what the attorney said, which is, let's not have it come up in public. Let's try to talk about it in advance and not, kind of figure out what the best way of doing it is, where the charter is not that specific, because a charter is like a constitution. Our role is big picture policy and legislation, budget approval, and oversight. And by oversight, I don't mean it in the management sense. I mean it in the accountability sense. Then there's also a constituent services element of it, because the mayor is elected citywide and we're all elected in one of 4 districts. And one of the great things there is, I'll give you an example. We had a RV park, which was leased through March 31st in my district. And the lease was up. It was coming up. It was, this was in February. And the plan was to let it expire. We have 55 people, or 55 RVs, and the people who live in them who were previously on the street, they're parked there now. And if we close this, they would have to find another place. Now in parallel, we're opening another place that has 70 new RV spots. So yeah, on net, that's 15 new spots. But A, that's across town, and B, there's a ton of other RVs that are out on the streets that people want to move into the safe RV parks. So although that is the mayor's decision, right, whether or not to renew this lease and things like that, especially off cycle, it's not part of our budget process. It's a place where we were able to talk to him and say, hey, 3 different district representatives from 3 different political backgrounds and viewpoints all think this is really important to keep it going. And so the mayor was able to find money in other projects and shift it over to keep it open for 3 more months so that it can be a part of our budget conversation. It's open until June 30th, and that's when our this year fiscal year ends. So that's where the gray comes in. And yeah, we're figuring it out, but there very different ways to interpret it. One of the basic things that when you describe a government is, are you a council manager government? Are you a mayor council, strong mayor? You know, all those sorts of things. Even that is described differently sometimes within the city, because we have, you could say we're this, but we have some exceptions, or we're this other thing, but we have these other exceptions. So I don't know that we fit perfectly into a category. And I also know that whatever we figure out now is going to change and evolve over the next 5-10 years as that second mayor, that second council president, that, you know, those all happen.
I will say something that I notice is a lot of asking from media to us, like, what do you think about Mayor Wilson's plan for XYZ, or both ways? I think that they'll ask him, like, what do you think about this resolution? And so there's a lot of trying to see, are we on the same page? Are we together? I know as council vice president, I have weekly meetings with him and kind of like his whole leadership team. And part of that is to make sure that we know what's coming up next and you're not caught flat-footed and you're able to give each other a heads up. And I was talking to someone about how earlier with like we have the city and the county are separate, different from San Francisco where it's the same. And just talking about how I think the average constituent is like, I don't care if this is like a county thing or a city thing, like this is a government thing, so figure it out. And so that's something that I feel like I try to bring to our leadership team a little bit with the mayor and council president and city administrator, where I'm like, it's our job to set the tone that we're gonna work together and figure this out. And about a month and a half into us working together as a leadership team, I was like, okay, will you guys give me a few hours and I can do like a little bit of a retreat for us? And it basically was exactly how I make classroom rules each year with my students. And it was great. And it was like, okay, let's talk about our values and our goals and see where they overlap and what do we need from each other for this to be a space where we can be productive. And I will say I left that retreat feeling some more hope because all of those leaders like really did show up like fully present. I know some people there were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the mayor like wasn't like checking his watch or looking at his phone. He really was there. And so trying to bring some of that energy into that leadership space too.
Thank you for that. So I know that we're running close on time and we wanted to open up the floor for questions. And so if folks have any questions, there's a mic moving about.
We'll do here than there.
Let's get started with the person in the back.
All right, thank you very much for this insightful panel. My name is Francis Abukbila. I work for PG Sound Sage and Sage Leaders in Seattle. I was curious about if you were to advise someone who is also vying to come join you, what would be your advice? That's the first question. The second question is that now that a system has been dismantled, a new system is being built, and you find yourself in this system, do you feel supported in this new system that you are building?
So I'll start with your second question. I'll start by saying I don't think the old system has been dismantled. I think it's in the process of being dismantled as we're building the new one. And I do feel supported for the most part. I think, you know, having 12 people allows for this to be true, but who the voters picked helped a lot too. I have amazing colleagues, and I'm really grateful that I get to go to work with people like Tiffany and Candace, you know, and many others as well, and feel that support. And that's not to say that it's only from the electeds either. I'm one of the few that's come from the administrative side. I was in the bureaucracy as an employee before. I know a lot of people there, but the biggest support of all comes from outside of the building, right? And if you and this is my pivot into answering your first question as well, if you connect with people and listen to them outside of it, you will feel supported by them. It's actually an amazing thing when you hear political figures say that it's hard to be outside and out and about in your own community. Well, you know, maybe listen a little bit more. Maybe have that be reflected in what you do. And you know, I heard that in other cities all the time. You know, and it doesn't have to be like that. And it maybe got a little harder to be out in community and listening during COVID, but you know, we're able to get out and talk to folks now. And to listen to them, and if we show our work, if we actually have the things that our districts at least, and ideally the whole city, are in favor of be reflected in the votes we take, that's what makes that part of the job easier and you feel supported. And it's also something you can do as a candidate. I'm assuming you mean that you're interested, like, in terms of the first question, in terms of running for office. Yeah, I think certainly having a great story, having a great narrative and PR and all that is great. Having amazing staff who can help get you to where you're going to go as a candidate is really vital too. Picking Colin's brain about ranked choice voting, if you run in that, really do that. But I think fundamentally it's your connection to your community, and I think there's probably no better example of that than the person sitting next to me, who we had this teacher strike that was really significant in our community, and who really motivated a lot of people to start paying attention to local government in the first place. And teacher Tiffany is one of those leaders, right? And so as you see that connection and the number of people from all walks of life who never voted before, I kept hearing her name before we'd ever met. It's a result of that connection. And so that's the single thing I'd recommend to anybody who wants to run for office. And I, like her, did not want to run until we had a better system either. So if you're not interested in the current system you have, fight for a better one too, whether you intend to run afterwards or just support someone else who does.
I love all of that. I would say if you're someone that a lot of people in your community have been like, you should run for office, you should run for office, then I think that's a sign that you should consider it. I think it's true that not everyone has to run for office, but you could also think about other ways to support candidates that you're excited about or get involved in. There are many different ways to get involved. But I do remember someone telling me, look, a lot of people learn how to run for office from like their rich uncle on the golf course, but like we also have the playbook and we can help working people run too, and you're not going to be alone. Because I think when I first thought of running for office, it seemed big and scary, and I kind of thought it would be like when I've gotten signatures to get ballot measures on the ballot, and I am like begging people to like stop and talk to me for a second in front of the grocery store, and realized, oh, all those people that said like you should run for office, like I was able to go to them and be like, so you're going to help, right? You're going to be a volunteer. And I think to know that like you bring your community around you and your people, and you create a kitchen cabinet. And also, I mean, here in Oregon, we have some things like Oregon Labor Candidate School, and I'll say the Working Families Party helped me a lot too with going through some boot camps just to learn to get that playbook, because I didn't know exactly how to do fundraising phone drives or write a statement for our voters pamphlet. And so to have some people who can help you walk you through that has been really helpful. And to see that there are some similar structures when you are an elected too. I would say maybe even more so. And so for me, I feel like a lot of them are there, and like finding the time to plug into different ones is something that I have to make. But like one group is called Local Progress, and they specifically help progressive electeds who are working locally and to support them. So taking advantage of some of those different programs. And I think just in general, if you open yourself up to like what might be the next step, and it could be like a volunteer role or a paid role or running for office, I think maybe some amazing things can come up.
Can I just add, general advice, be comfortable getting no's from people that should be saying yes to you to donate money. It won't happen as often as you think, but be emotionally resilient for that. The other thing is, you may have a particular thing about you that makes it harder. I'm the only man of color on the city council. We're the first 2 Asian Americans ever elected to Portland City Council, right? And our experiences are different. Candace's experience is different, and it's different when you're a candidate too. And I'm not going to tell you there's an answer to this thing, but it's a thing to be aware of. And I'm lucky, there's some stuff, but also people both in the campaign and now on the whole are better than you might fear. At least in Portland, I hope it's true wherever you're from too. But I'm also biased. It's the best city on earth. So yeah.
I think we have time for more questions. We have one right here, right in the front.
Great. Thank you so much for being here and all for the work you do. So as I think we've all learned today, or for those our friends out of state have been learning today, the charter review process was pretty rigorous and had some pretty clear vision for representation in city council. My question to you, and I think this will be helpful for people outside of our city who choose to replicate this or some version of it. We did the charter review process, which changed the structure and our elections, but it did not necessarily change the internal operations, the procedure elements, the culture, as you mentioned, of how you all do the actual work. Now that you've been in the mud for a little bit, how would you look backwards and say, I wish we'd changed this also in the charter as it reflects to our work, or we wish we tackled these internal issues earlier in our work, or what big roadblocks do you see in how things have been done that you hope to change moving forward that others could think about as they design these processes in their cities?
One thing I'll say, I'm grateful that we have a bunch of different volunteer advisory bodies in the city. We have like around 80, and one of them is the Government Transition Advisory Committee that has helped bring a lot of the vision and then also made a ton of recommendations. And so I was just responding to an email to you earlier today about how often would it make sense to have our city manager or city administrator give some reports as to like what advice they're actually taking, what they're implementing, what they're not implementing in order to like keep having those touch points. That committee did a lot of work in this transition time, but is not gonna stay the same as a committee. So I would say, I don't know if I have some specific things. There were some specific decisions that were made that made the start really hard, where we only had one staff each. That just really slowed things down and was really tricky. So I guess it's maybe like funding some of that stuff, or like there are these great ideas to have in-district offices, but it's a lot harder now to have that conversation and like convince constituents that that's really gonna be a huge support to them. I think it'd be easier if we didn't have to like campaign for that, if some of that had just happened, but that's oftentimes going to be the thing, is make sure it's actually in the budget to make sure it comes true. But I'll say, I mean, you can look at all of their recommendations, they're public online, and I just feel really lucky that we've had such a dedicated group of volunteers that are outlining suggestions and have done the research and looked at, here are a bunch of cities across the nation, and this is how they fill in the blank. This is how they like do community engagement. This is how they do this over here. And so, yeah, that's been helpful.
Yeah, big picture, I think the charter folks nailed it. And I think that, we could quibble around the edges, and I'm sure each of us would have at least one thing we'd want to change. The only thing that comes to mind for me, even as a minor thing, is also related to advisory bodies. And it's pretty big picture. I think we got it. The thing that I is outside of the charter that I would mention, which is the culture. I wish that we had more ability under state law to meet together when we're not talking about business, to build those relationships, and in particular community agreements or community standards. You might be familiar with that, and to talk about how we treat each other and how we treat the public. So that's I think the only thing that immediately comes to mind in a big picture sense. But to your original point, I have a whiteboard that says, and I've written on it, are we changing how governing is done, or are we only changing who does the governing? And that's something I think about every single day on every single question, whether it's on whether we're voting to close debate and cut off people who've got their hands up trying to speak. I'm talking about councilors as well as the public, or whether it's an actual policy decision on terms of where power ends up flowing in the city. And I think that's bigger than just the charter. That's the difference between what the charter enabled and what it can't guarantee unless we do it.
I think we have another question right over here.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Wes.
Last question.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that one of the previous panels we talked about, it was $17 million for the charter process and also implementation of ranked choice voting over the next 3 years. I'm from Virginia. We're also, I think, we'd love to have more of these reforms. We're currently doing ranked choice voting in Arlington and Charlottesville, thanks to my colleague over here. But we're also publicly small donor match elections. But y'all are in this budget process, all localities everywhere facing a shortfall, especially due to the federal government and the upcoming economic outlook. So what would you say to local officials who are maybe open to the programs and like what the stuff that what you've just described, or changing governing, but they're seeing a wave of other budget priorities and thinking, well, how do we actually pay for this? You know, are there ways that changing the way you govern actually has saved money or made it more cost effective, or are there different taxes we should look at, or just why is it worth doing?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't want to accept the premise of 17 million without doing my own math, but because I know that there's different ways we've counted it here. But I'm gonna, just for purpose of this question, use that number. Each of you could probably look around at what's something that you think you waste money on at the city that you're in, or the county, or the state. And that's probably a lot of things. And I'll narrow that down to the things that aren't publicly popular. Do those things add up to more than $17 million? I guarantee they do here. And if you get a system that reflects your people, you will end up in your budget process saving that money. Now, it won't happen in the first year necessarily. So there is a little bit of a hiccup, but what's the point of government, right? I think it's not just to administer, you know, the people that fill the potholes. That's a part of it. It's not just to administer the process of your water system. That's a part of it. I think big picture, the purpose of government is to get a very large group of people into a decision-making process that we can all accept the outcome of, even if we don't agree with it. And so having a better system is worth the money. Yeah.
I agree with all of that, and oftentimes say budgets are moral documents. So I think it depends on if it's really a value and priority. And I think telling stories, like looking at other cities, you can use these examples and talk about someone that was a public school teacher winning. I mean, I think being able to tell those stories and help your community imagine, like, what would it look like if, like, this leader that we really trust over here was actually making decisions for our city, and if we really felt truly represented. And I think bringing it back to Lani Guinier and her writing, just, you know, really thinking about ways to be innovative in addressing equities in terms of access to power is huge. And I think a lot of people are watching Portland, watching this form of government right now, and seeing if it works. I think some people are hoping it doesn't, but a lot of people are excited and are seeing that that we're trying something really amazing. So I think as much as you can give examples of exploring different ways to innovate and really have governance for the people, it seems like the time to really pull in people who maybe like haven't gotten super involved, but do feel that sense of like, oh, I need to pay attention. Like, democracy is not just a given. This is a way to really ignite people around local government and and pushing for governance to really be for the people.
Great. Well, again, I think we would like to thank you again for making time in your busy schedule. I know things got pushed back, but you still made it here because you wanted to be part of this conversation. I also want to acknowledge that this is a room full of reformer-minded people who are looking at making some big systemic change within their own communities. And I think throughout the process, there was a lot of criticisms of the work that the Charter Commission was doing and the goals that they were trying to accomplish. And I think one thing that really has stuck with me, and I think it's maybe because the one argument against the charter reform that really upset me the most was that it would dilute the quality of candidates that would run for city council. And I'm a constituent of yours, actually, Councilor. Yeah.
Awesome.
And so I couldn't be more proud to be represented by you at the city level. And I think what these city councilors are doing today really speaks for itself and the quality of people that they are and the values that they are putting into the policymaking process to ensure that community is heard. So again, thank you so much for being here with us.